Welcome back to Cover Crimson. My name is Emily Grace McWhorter, and I join Clint Lamb every Monday and Wednesday at 9:30 to get your week started with all things Alabama football. Alabama football is not playing tonight, Clint, but it is the national championship. I have to ask, who do you have in that game? And do you think that the national championship title game is being drug out into January a little too far?
That's been the big question, right? I like the fact that it's going a little bit further. Like, I feel like there's one less week, or really 10 days, I guess, because the national championship would typically be around like the 9th, 10th, 11th.
Mhm.
But 10 extra days of like it being football season, even though it's not football season for Alabama, that's 10 less days of the off season. So I'm never going to complain about that. Do I think that the hype around this game has really not been there? Yes. It almost feels like there's not a national championship game tonight. Now, granted, for Ohio State fans, they don't feel that way. Notre Dame fans
Right.
certainly don't feel that way. But I think for everybody else, mostly, just for some odd reason, it feels, and maybe that is how far it's being pushed. I guess most of the time, a lot of people are kind of in an NFL mindset by now,
Right.
gearing up for NFC, AFC championships and Super Bowls and all that. But I don't know. It hadn't felt like there has been as much excitement. And granted, that could be more of a personal thing because, at this point, it's like if you're an Alabama fan, you're supposed to hate Notre Dame. You can't pull for the Fighting Irish. But the Big Ten is in a huge battle with the SEC right now for kind of what's the best conference in college football. Big Ten's coming off a national championship with Michigan last year. They go two in a row, and that narrative gets all the worse. So really, Notre Dame winning, it benefits nobody but Notre Dame, who's an independent. So at this point, if I had to choose who I was pulling for, I mean, as much as I don't want to do it, I think I'm going for the Fighting Irish. What about you? I mean, granted, you don't have a fandom stake in there, but I think your perspective is actually better for what we're talking about because
Yeah.
you're about as unbiased as it comes when it comes to this sort of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm pulling like you for the Fighting Irish. I really like what Marcus Freeman has done with that team. They've been almost America's team, and like you said, that is not supposed to be the case with Notre Dame ever until now. But I do think, since I am employed by a company that very heavily covers the SEC, I need the SEC to look as good as possible in multiple facets. So I'm pulling for the Irish. I've loved seeing a lot of the media coverage this week from Riley Leonard and Will Howard. I think it's been really interesting. And I just like the story of both of these teams. But like you, I'm agreeing it doesn't feel like there's a national title game tonight. And I also think, though, part of that is, the NFL playoffs this season, they've been really, really good, strong games. I personally obviously lean more college football when it comes to what, my interests are. But I found myself really keeping up, specifically with the NFL playoffs last night. Eagles win. Crazy game. Jalen Hurts, a lot of Alabama alumni in that game. And you mentioned that it wasn't only players, but it was staff as well. What did you see from that game? And let's switch things up. Who are you pulling for these final few games?
I'm definitely pulling for the Eagles. I'd already started to kind of follow the Eagles. I've never had an NFL team, and I've always wanted one. Not saying I'm going with the Eagles, even though my wife is pushing me in that direction. She wants me to pick because she wants somebody to like specifically pull for.
Yeah.
I don't like jumping on the bandwagon, but we had talked about the Eagles just because I'm like, I mean, this is not going to make Alabama fans happy, probably.
Oh, let's
But
hear it. Let's hear it.
one of my favorite players of all time in the NFL was Cam Newton. And I think it was more so like once he got away from Auburn, it's like I'm
Hmm.
happy with you for not coming back for your senior year. But just a freak of nature, so much fun to watch. And it was nice seeing him do what he did to Alabama's defense in the second half of that Iron Bowl against NFL defenses for quite a long time. But then Luke Kuechly was my favorite defensive player in the NFL. I played linebacker. Ray Lewis was by far his all-time favorite player,
Hmm.
as far as the NFL. But so the fact that they were both, playing for the same team, I followed the Panthers. But then once they left, I was like, I mean, and this was pre-Bryce, of course. But I realized, okay, you can't follow players if you're going to like build a fandom around that because they come
Yeah,
and
that's a
go.
good point. Hmm.
So then, we've been trying to pick somewhere. It's like, okay, where can we see ourselves kind of settling in? I like franchises that think like I do. I'll say the Bengals are certainly, their front office and the way that they draft players and evaluate them. It always seems like we're on the same page. Howie Roseman with the Eagles, kind of the same way. So I've always respected the work that he's been doing. So I don't know that I'm an Eagles fan. Even though my wife did give me an Eagles shirt for Christmas because she's like, hey, if I just get it, maybe we'll
Okay.
decide. So, but we'll see. But with so many Bama players right now, it is super easy.
Mhm.
And SEC players, I mean, obviously
Yeah.
Bama fans probably aren't pulling for Georgia, but I mean, their defense, Georgia defensive linemen in these playoffs have been making
Yeah.
a huge impact. So they're a fun team to watch. Obviously, Jalen getting hurt was kind of concerning yesterday, but
Mhm.
Saquon Barkley has been an incredible addition for them. Was pulling for the Ravens last night.
I know.
There's a lot of history there. Ozzie Newsome, I always had a lot of respect for him. Me and him were kind of on the same page with player evaluations too. And Eric DeCosta, for the most part, were similar. But it was crazy how that game ended. I really thought
Yeah.
that the Ravens were going to figure out a way to come back and win that. But you're 100% right. The playoffs, maybe not the wild card round was mixed results.
Mhm.
But really, I mean, there's been some really good football games. Obviously, this past weekend, but also really in that wild card round as well.
So me and my dad, we were talking about this last night. What was the more fun game to play in, or what would be the more fun game to play in? A snow game or a rain game when it's warm outside and it's not cold?
I want no part of rain games. I
Mhm.
can't stand. I've played in some rain games, and granted, I was in high school. I think maybe in college too. With the NFL, they get in there in halftime and they can like take their pads off
Yeah.
and dry it out, and they got probably extra jerseys and get dry and stuff. Like you had to go right back out there in your soaked outfit. For the
So
second
not
half.
fun.
Yeah, but the snow, I never played in snow, obviously, so I don't know how fun or not fun it would
Yeah.
be. From a watching it standpoint, I get why players. I would just want to see the product the way it's supposed to be. Like I hate how sometimes weather conditions can factor into maybe a team is built a certain way, and it's a
Yeah.
natural advantage that rolls through that lends itself. Like the Ravens, I would have thought going into that game last night. Okay, and I guess Josh Allen
Yeah.
and James Cook too. They can run the football, but just the Ravens and how they were built, I'm like, hey, snow is going to greatly benefit them with Derrick Henry and
Right.
Lamar Jackson. But at the same, it's football. Like that feels like, or at least NFL football. You don't see that with college much, but seeing white on the ground, I mean, it does add a little bit of a wrinkle or element to it that's kind of fun. I don't know how exactly I feel about it though, because I have mixed feelings.
Yeah. I don't know. I think for me, obviously, guys, I'm not suiting up to go play an NFL game anytime soon, but the chance to have it be snowing that heavy, I do hate the cold. We were talking about that before we got on. It is very cold where we both are. I'm not sure where you guys are tuning in from. Let us know in the comments. Also, let us know if you would rather have snow game or like a torrential downpour kind of game. This is NFL level too. We're gonna add a caveat to that. But with making snow angels in the end zone, it just looks like a good time. Clearing out the spot for the place kicker, like things like that, that just I don't know. I like it, but I can also see how bad it must hurt to get popped when it's that cold outside and you've got that football tucked under you and you're getting slammed. Not for me. Not for me.
I will say I have played in some cold games. The game before we went to the state championship in 2006, it was like I think 17 degrees outside. We were playing J.O.
Mhm.
Johnson, and I was a sophomore, so I played a little bit, but not much. But our starting linebacker tore his ACL in the game before the state championship. The problem is I didn't think I was going to be playing a lot, so I had 3 layers of Under Armour, top and bottom. I had hot hands in my cleats.
Yeah.
I had like 3 pairs of socks. So I'm like the kid from A Christmas Story running around that entire first half. And then when I was able to get to halftime, I took like all of that off. But
Yeah.
I will say when you are hitting and being hit in that kind of weather, you feel every ounce of pain
Yeah.
for a good 2 or 3 seconds after the hit. Like, and it's even stuff. I mean, it's a pretty noticeable difference for sure.
Yeah. Well, we're going to get into our continued series that me and Clint are doing over here on Cover Crimson. And that is Clint's star rating of different position groups at Alabama. So we're doing one offensive, one defense every Monday and Wednesday. And this will take us past the Senior Bowl, probably to about mid-February by the time we break it all down. Before we get into this, Clint, where can everyone find us and where should they look for your latest message board posts and things of that nature?
Covercrimson.com, a great message board community. Christian Sykes, actually, we did our first basketball episode last night. We're going to be doing that every Sunday, kind of recapping the couple of games that Alabama plays, and then looking ahead a little bit towards the next week. So it was Christian, myself, and Mick. And Christian's doing a great job as far as he's doing some basketball previews before games, obviously doing some post-game stuff. So that's been great conversation. I got the snap count stuff as far as career snap counts. I'm going to be doing the defense early this week, did the offense last week. A lot of great, interesting conversations surrounding that. So any of the written stuff as far as my thoughts or, just wanting to be a part of the message board community, which is growing every single day, covercrimson.com. And then you can find me, of course, on Twitter. That's where I'm kind of am having the most fun. I'm picking fun at other fan bases. That's kind of how I built my persona on social media, I guess. But then also we got the YouTube channel going, and it's doing extremely well. So if you haven't already liked this video, turn on the notification bell to where you can get all the future videos, or at least know exactly when they drop. And then also subscribe to the YouTube channel. I don't think people quite realize how much that helps us as we continue to grow. I mean, people's been doing a great job of it, but just every subscription, it costs you absolutely nothing. And we're doing everything we can to provide the best content possible. So if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel as well.
Yeah, and we really do appreciate all of the comments, things like that. We try and get back to all of them. So again, comment below on this video to let us know what your thoughts are in real time. And we'll on the back end go back in and talk to you guys. But we love you. We love getting this opportunity to talk about Alabama. So let's jump in with our first group. We're doing the offensive line and the defensive line today, Clint. And I want to start things off with the offensive line. Give me your overview, and the end of this, we'll talk a little bit, and then Clint will give his star rating.
Yeah, I mean, the offensive line's so intriguing to me because when you start looking at, okay, like Caden Proctor, he's a junior. Cam Dewberry, who we think is going to be in that competition at left guard with Gino Vandermark. Dewberry is a senior. Gino Vandermark is a fifth-year senior. Parker Brailsford's a fourth-year junior. Jaden Roberts, fifth-year senior. Wilkin Formby is going to be a redshirt sophomore, so he's going to be in his third year. You got some other guys, some younger guys who are going to be in some of these competitions who are third year players, maybe some second year. Also, I wouldn't be surprised if like a Michael Carroll, a first year guy, was in that competition at left guard as well. But just a lot of experience, a lot of guys who have played a lot of football. Like Gino Vandermark has started 10 games in his career. Cam Dewberry started 8. They've seen plenty of snaps. Have they been full-time starters or impact players? No. But the experience factor for what you're looking for is absolutely there at this point for both guys. And the fact that they're fourth and fifth year players, like you got a really good, you lost some experience. You got a really good blend of experience really across the board if you really want it. My main concern is the depth, particularly at tackle. I feel like on the interior, they're great. I mean, you got guys for days and you're trying to figure out who's going to start. And it's not a matter of, man, I'm not seeing any great options. I'm seeing a ton of great options. It's just a matter of determining who's going to come out on top and win some of these competitions. At tackle, Caden Proctor is going to be a starter. I think him having the entire offseason, with Alabama's program this year is really going to help him. I think he played a lot better last year. A lot of fans maybe on the surface didn't feel like he did, but I'm telling you, he was significantly improved, especially in pass protection. But Wilkin Formby showed some flashes, had a really rough performance against USF, but that's a guy, you feel pretty good about him at right tackle. A new one, the guy from Ball State that they added out of the transfer portal, he has some swing tackle ability. He got a start last year for Ball State at left tackle, played about 100 snaps. So you add a little bit of experience, a project that only played, very limited football in high school. And so, you wonder how he's going to get developed. Where can he fit in? Does he compete for a starting job, or is he, valuable depth, or is he kind of more of a project for this year? I don't think Alabama can afford for him to be a full-on project because of the tackle depth. But you also got a couple of guys that we've talked about, Casey Poe and Olasolinen in particular, who have played tackle in the past. They're not ideal tackles by any means. But last year, Alabama had a tackle problem with Caden Proctor not being on the roster during the spring and all that. And you saw Poe and Alinen both see some snaps at right tackle. So I wouldn't be shocked if one of those guys, at least, maybe both, but I would probably say one, got some snaps. I probably would project Casey Poe right now. But it's an intriguing group. I love the experience factor kind of across the board. I just worry about the depth at tackle, if they can get that figured out and Jaden Roberts can get healthy and stay healthy for the entirety of the season and give this entire unit a chance to kind of gel as a collective unit, I think they're going to end up being pretty good. But there are enough question marks where you don't know exactly how it's going to go one way or another.
Yeah, I want to focus on Parker Brailsford for a second. I feel like he's a guy that really has been snubbed in a lot of ways in terms of discussion this, postseason, making all team SEC and things like that. How significant was it for him to come back to Alabama with his experience, but also his leadership element that he does bring?
Some people are going to paint this as bias. That's fine. It's my honest evaluation. I think he's the best center in college football. I thought he was this year. Do I think that he's going to have to be scheme specific in the NFL due to his size? Absolutely. But if he ends up with the right team, he is going to be one of the best centers in the NFL as well. And that just his ability to pull as a center, his athleticism to be able to get out there, get on some defenders in space. One of the best players I've ever seen do that as far as at Alabama, and especially being like a center. Like, that's so difficult to snap and pull. And it adds such a wrinkle or a dynamic to your offense as far as the flexibility with your offensive line and kind of what you can do. And so just one of the most valuable players on the team. I'll be doing kind of a rankings. I haven't decided if it'll be like a top 25 rankings or if it'll be me ranking the entire roster player by player. But Parker Brailsford, I'm going to go ahead and a little bit of a spoiler. However I decide to do it, he's certainly going to be in my top 25, no doubt. But he's going to be up there. And I just want people to go ahead and know I think very highly of him, and him coming back to Alabama on top of getting, Jaden Roberts and hopefully he gets healthy, and then on top of getting Caden Proctor, who's now got a couple of years of experience under his belt and will get to spend the offseason in Tuscaloosa for the first time. I think he's going to, I think this offensive line it's got a ton of potential.
Yeah. One thing about Parker Brailsford is that his athleticism, like we mentioned, that he brings to that center position, he's twitchy, and that's not very common. But like you said, that, it's going to be very scheme specific where he goes to the NFL because those margins are so thin, right? He can be easily overpowered by an opposing defense because of his size. I think he's 6'2", I want to say, 290.
I don't think he's 290. They have him listed as 290. He was 275, I think, at Washington. They got him listed at 290 now. Do I think he's gained weight? Absolutely. Do I think he's 290? I mean, he might be now, but just watching him at the beginning of the season when they changed that weight, I was like, I doubt it. But either way, he's 285, 290-ish.
What does Kalen DeBoer's and Coach Cap's offensive scheme, why does that allow a player like him to be so successful in that?
Because of how they use the pullers and the fact that, a lot of pin and pulls, a lot of being able to let your offensive line get out there in space and get a hat on a hat. Like, from an athleticism standpoint, guys are so much bigger than the defensive backs and stuff that they're working out, there to get. But those guys can also use their athleticism to kind of elude the offensive lineman and get around him and still make a play. And so Parker Brailsford brings that size, that nastiness that you look for, but the athleticism to complement that. One of the most athletically gifted offensive linemen in all of college football. He's got like a wrestling background that is very much on display as far as using leverage in the trenches and doing some of the more traditional stuff that you do with your center. But special talent. And really, but you look at like Caden Proctor. Is he an ideal fit for Kalen DeBoer's offense? Probably not. Can he survive? Absolutely. He's got enough athleticism, and I think there's going to be a continued effort with him being there for the entire offseason to get him to continue to get his body in the right place. And I don't think he's going to be a 320-pound tackle. I really don't. He's just not one of the, like Evan Neal, he was never going to be a 320-pound tackle. J.C. Latham was never going to be that. But you can get him down in that 330, 335 range, maybe 325, but I just highly doubt. I think 330 would be kind of the max, or the minimum weight that he would with his frame and stuff. But he's not an ideal fit. Wilkin Formby, he looks more like a Kalen DeBoer tackle. I think athletically he's definitely serviceable. But I don't think he's got like premier athleticism. Like, you look at Jackson Lloyd, his background is like a basketball player, and just he brings that. Michael Carroll, absolutely brings that athleticism. So like the guys that they're recruiting, the young players, fit more of the Kalen DeBoer system and what they're going to ask their offensive linemen to do. Now, you still got to be big and strong and powerful. It's
Yeah.
the SEC. You can't be complete finesse, but you need to have a finesse element. And I think, looking at some of these guys, like I'm not saying they are avoiding big body guys, but you got to bring a little athleticism to complement that. And I think that as you're getting into year 2 under Kalen DeBoer, they'll start to figure some of those things out a little bit more. Body types will look a little bit more like what you would expect in the Kalen DeBoer offense, and I think that should only help things.
What position battles do you anticipate taking place on the offensive line come summer and fall camp?
Anugwam, is he going to compete there with Wilkin Formby at right tackle? I more so think that he was like the perfect guy to bring in to battle and push Formby.
Mm-hmm.
But I think Formby's like Elijah Pritchett, when he entered the transfer portal, what I didn't like about that was who are you going to get out of the transfer portal that is as good as Elijah Pritchett? And he wasn't all that great, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But what are you going to go get that's going to say, okay, we'll let you compete. We're not going to guarantee you a starting job. And really, we like Formby. And so we're going to give him every opportunity. You'll still get some opportunities yourself, but we're kind of projecting him to be our starting right tackle, but we need somebody to compete with him and kind of be insurance.
Mm-hmm.
How much are you willing to pay that guy? First of all. Second of all, what caliber of player is going to be willing to do that? If you're good enough to be a really good tackle or whatever, you're going to go somewhere where you are getting paid not only, but also you have a much clearer path to guarantee playing time. And so, but at the same, so I think right now at tackle, Formby should be the projected starter, and I think they're pretty happy with that. Now that's assuming he continues to grow and develop, but they like the direction that he's heading. Left guard is the one that's the most up in the air because Cam Dewberry was brought in. He's got some starting experience, but you also got Geno Vandermark. Like if you would have lost Jaden Roberts, it would have made sense for Vandermark, who had kind of split time with him this year with Roberts being injured, to kind of be your assumed starter at right guard. Vandermark does have some positional flexibility on the interior. I think he would be the first guy off the bench at left guard, right guard, and center. But he's going to be competing for that job with Roberts coming back. I would assume that Vandermark's going to compete with Dewberry. They would be the two main ones, but like Ola Salinen, that's a guy who's shown a lot of promise. Really liked him coming out of high school. He's been playing left guard. He's played some right guard. He's played some right tackle. He will probably be in that competition. Casey Poe, formerly the number 1 interior offensive lineman in the country coming out of high school, brings some of that athleticism. He might be in that competition at left guard. Michael Carroll is a guy who's he looks like an immediate contributor. You can't assume anything, but he's enrolling early. He has all the ability in the world. Will he be in that competition? So, when I talk about, I have a pretty good idea of who the starting 4 of the 5 offensive linemen are going to be, including at right tackle, even though there will technically be a battle. Left guard, honestly, have no idea. It could be one of 5 or 6 guys.
And we'll have to wait on that, and it'll be fun to keep up with. We'll make sure to keep you guys informed. It feels like it's a long way away, spring and summer and fall camp, but it will be here before we all know it. One more thing on the offensive line before we give that star rating. Cam Dewberry, I want to mention him, the Texas A&M transfer. We talked about him briefly, but what does he bring to this offensive line, in your opinion, what you've seen from his time at Texas A&M now to an Alabama uniform?
Yeah, he's kind of been up and down. I've seen some tape that was pretty bad. And I've seen some tape that was pretty good. And so in some ways it was similar to Vandermark in the limited that we had from his time at Michigan State. Not the same player by any means.
Yeah.
But it just, where it's like, okay, I can see what they're envisioning. If you trust Coach Cap as far as the development side of things, which they fully do, you would expect to get more consistent play out of a guy who's now going to be going into year 4 playing college football. But also like Wilkin Formby, there's some really good on tape when you watch him. There's also some, obviously the USF game was really, really bad. So you're expecting growth from Formby. Why would you not give Dewberry the same, respect or belief? Less about him because he's coming over from A&M, but the coaching staff sees something in him. Do I think he was brought in to be an automatic starter? Absolutely not. And I think he understood that going in. I don't think he was one of those caliber of players that was so good where he's expecting to step into a starting role. He just knows with Tyler Booker moving on to the NFL, he'll have every opportunity to compete. And there's nobody that's like that he would view as like, oh, this guy's clearly ahead of me. Gino Vandermark is a good player, better in pass protection than run blocking, in my opinion, watching it this past season. But he's nobody that you look at and say he's a guaranteed starter. And these other guys, none of them are proven. Michael Carroll's young. You don't know what to expect from him. So he clearly saw an opportunity to compete, but he was not guaranteed anything. And I don't think he's coming in with the expectation of, I'm 100% going to be the starter. He just believes in his ability and what he can provide that competition. And right now, as it sits, I have him winning that competition in my depth chart projections. But that's, like I said, a lot will depend on what happens in the spring. That will be one of the top position battles that we'll be monitoring kind of as spring approaches and, throughout the spring.
I keep saying one more thing about the offensive line, but I keep asking another thing. Tyler Booker's departure. One thing that I noticed continually during my time at the facility, speaking with Coach Cap, who I really enjoyed kind of getting to know him this season and his approach to things, but it was Tyler Booker and his impact that he had not only in his position group, but the team overall, right? He was that go-to leader in practice, in the facility, game day. And what I'm going to be monitoring, this offseason is who's going to step up into that role. Who is going to be that next person? And I'm curious what your thoughts are on that, specifically with the offensive line group. Do you already have kind of a look at someone that you think is going to fill that very, vast hole that Tyler Booker is leaving in this program?
Well, it is a major hole. That's probably the biggest question mark. Now, Parker Brailsford, he was a guy that was, he had been at Washington. He wasn't from the South, no experience. Obviously, we know kind of about his struggles last spring.
Yeah.
As far as the adjustment or acclimation period. But I think he's comfortable now. I think his teammates have done a great job of embracing him. He feels more comfortable. And he's a guy who should have everybody's respect in that locker room. He works extremely hard. He's extremely good at what he does. So I would expect him to be in that conversation. Jaden Roberts has been a guy who's been around for forever. He was part of the Saban way. He was a leader this year. His ability to lead was somewhat hindered, when you're constantly banged up and you can't perform at your best. I mean, I'm not saying he wasn't a leader at all. I know that he was. But just, when you're not available or you're in and out of the lineup, holding everybody else around you accountable is a little bit more difficult. So hopefully him being healthy helps. But Caden Proctor, with his talent coming out of high school, the fact that he's been around, he's gone through some of those struggles himself, where if there's a guy, if Formby is going through some things next year, kind of like the USF game, Caden can continue to be kind of an outlet for him where he can kind of, share his experiences and how he's overcome them and all that stuff. But they need him to be a leader. When you think about like Alabama's teams that have been really good, especially look at defensively, it's all been in the trenches. When they have really good trench play and leadership, guys who demand, a lot out of their guys, like a Jonathan Allen, Deron Payne, you go back to like Jesse Williams, Josh Chapman was one of those guys. Damian Square was one of those guys on that 2011 team. When they've had like elite teams, they've had really good leadership as far as in the trenches. I think the offensive line is going to be critical to that. I think they got some options there, but there's nobody, in my opinion, other than maybe Jaden Roberts, where you just assume, with him coming back, he's going to be one of those guys. But I think they need a little bit more, and it's probably going to need to come from, Caden Proctor and Parker Brailsford.
All right, it's time. The rating out of 5 stars for the offensive line. Clint, let me hear it.
I really struggled because I really like the group, and I don't think 3 stars is quite an adequate reflection for how I feel. 3.5 stars, if I can make that work. Rivals doesn't do that. Other places that do the star ratings, they don't do 3.5 stars, but that's kind of how I feel. Where it's, I wanted to say 4, but it's like, man, you feel really good about some other position groups that are way ahead of this offensive line from a question mark standpoint, not from a talent standpoint or a depth standpoint, experience standpoint. But there are more question marks with this offensive line than almost any other position group. And I say almost, and we'll talk about that more soon. But I'll say 3.5 stars. I'm kind of cheating there, but just know the battle was between 3 and 4. I really feel like post spring, if we do something similar to this, I wouldn't be shocked at all if some of these questions got answered, or at least we thought answers were being developed. And I went with a 4 with the potential to even push 5 if everything comes together correctly. I know fans, hearing 3-star anything, 3.5 is probably not what you want to hear when it comes to your offensive line, but I think it's got a chance to be in a really good place. But there's too many question marks for me to give it a 4 or 5-star right now.
Cover Crimson, we can do 3.5 stars, and you could do a 0.75 if you really need to. We have no rules here. Let us
Love
know
it.
what your star rating is for the offensive line group. And if you agree with Clint, it's okay to disagree with him. He may call you out. He probably will reply to you, and that's the fun of it all.
I don't know everything. I'll tell you that. And I will say what I love about our subscribers, like on the message board and people in the comments, a lot of times they bring up points. And I'm like, you know what? That's a really good point. And so to think that I'm set in my ways and you can't convince me with some good arguments or points, that is far from the truth. This is a discussion. This isn't this isn't a sermon. I'm not preaching
I like
here.
that. I like that. We had a great conversation on Cover Crimson. If you're subscribed to that, you can get some of that conversation, but we all discussed our sleeper player for this season, and we had some varying answers. I'll leave it at that. You need to subscribe over there and join us and give us your own sleeper player. But Clint, I think, was convinced on a few players that he may not have expected.
I was, yeah. That's a great way to put it, and that's exactly what I'm talking about. People bring people up, and you start thinking about it, and when they throw their reasoning out there, it's like, man, that's such a great. Yeah, I'm just going to start inviting people to hop on here with us and talk about a little bit more of this stuff because we got some great subscribers that bring some excellent points to the table.
We do. Let's transition to the defensive line. We're going to do the same thing here. Give me your breakdown, and then we'll wrap up with a star rating for the D-line.
Defensive line is similar to the offensive line. I think there's a little bit more I wouldn't say proven. It's like there's 3 positions, and we include the Bandits with the defensive line. They're kind of a position group, and we'll talk about the Bandits kind of twofold. We'll talk about them with the Wolves when we do the edge because they're kind of technically an edge position. But as far as practice, they are practicing with the interior defensive line, so we'll go ahead and include them here too. But getting LT Overton back, massive. Getting Tim Keenan back, massive. You do lose Tim Smith. You had lost Jaheim Otis. The fact that Jameer Latham, you're going to see him. He's been moved to Wolf, but I almost guarantee you, depending on body type and just how much weight he loses, I still think it's possible that he plays some Bandit, especially if they start running into a depth issue, which I do not foresee that being a problem. But, you really like the fact they added Kelby Collins to the mix. You still have 4 Bandits that, 3 Bandits that, 2 that you feel really good about. You got 1 that you're feeling pretty good about in Jordan Renaud. And then you got Keon Keeley, who's kind of like that X factor. It's like, man, this guy, whenever it clicks, you would fully expect him to become a star. It just still hadn't clicked, and you can't just automatically assume that that's going to happen because it hadn't happened up to this point. But I believe it's going to happen at some point. So why not this offseason? Go ahead.
When you say click for Keon Keeley, be specific with that because I feel like that can be taken a few different ways. Are you saying that in terms of scheme, in terms of just playing at this level? What do you mean by that?
I think him rechanging his body the way that he did last offseason, that takes some time to adjust. You can't just throw weight on a guy. And the way that he moves, the way that he operates, the way he does things is different. As someone, I went through that myself when I played. I went from being kind of a linebacker. At one point, they were going to move me to interior defensive line. My defensive line coach, he's like, every time you get a Big Mac, you get 2 of them, and then all of a sudden I gained all this weight, not great weight. And then they're like, you know what, we're moving you back to linebacker. And also I'm playing like some wolf type of position. We actually called it the Bandit, but it was really a wolf. But then I'm like, man, this weight playing this way, I really wish I wouldn't have done that because they had never stopped. I always kept getting 2 Big Macs. Been doing it ever since. But also I moved differently. Everything how I functioned as an athlete was just different. And so Keon Keeley adjusting to his body, that was always going to take some time. He's sitting up there, 6'5", 6'6", 280 pounds, 275, somewhere in there. This was a guy that was playing like 240. So that's taking some time, but also schematically becoming more comfortable. Like from a technical standpoint, technique was a big problem for him. And just with his length and stuff, understanding leverage, being able to hold up. I think from a pass rushing standpoint, he's got the traits and he's shown some flashes there. But I think being able to kind of, when you're 6'5", 6'6", 280 pounds, 275 pounds, like, You need to be a rock against the run. And then just if you can add that pass rushing element on top of that, it makes you more of a complete guy, and it kind of makes you a lot more lethal, just from a technique standpoint, and understanding the defense and just the nuances, the little details of it, playing defensive line. I think he's still making some adjustments, but I think he's coming along nicely. I think all the extra coaching that he's been getting, when I've watched him in practice, which it has been a while, several months, we will hopefully get to see them again some in the spring. I'll be curious to see how he looks when we do get out there, but like he's a guy I'll be keeping an eye on, because every time I saw him, from a technical standpoint and what he was doing on the sleds and all that, he looked like he was improving.
Yeah, and I'm curious what our access will be this season in terms of how much we will get to see. Obviously, we're all hoping that we have quite a few spring practices and fall camp to really psychoanalyze this team, which is exactly what Alabama football wants us to be doing. But I will be interested to see kind of, what we actually get to see. I know last year it was these brief periods. I think it was like period 4 to 5 that we would get out there for about 7 to 10 minutes. And then, as I said, nothing that Alabama loves more than psychoanalyzing their football team and making depth charts like we do have on Cover Crimson. But as Clinton sips his drink, it'll be interesting to see kind of what access we get. And like we've been saying, guys, we'll keep you updated. And if there's any questions that you do have about the offensive line, about specific players, between Clinton and I and everyone else here at Cover Crimson, we will do our best to use our resources, our connections, and then what we have seen or saw this past season to try and answer those. But continue on with your breakdown of this defensive line.
Yeah, the interior defensive line is so interesting because like Tim Keenan's like nose tackle, just a real boxy guy, a bulldog in there. Very tough to block, to dig out, short, stocky, powerful, brings a lot more athleticism than you would think. A little bit more disruptive than you would think. Like he's not just a body out there that's tough to push around. Like he can, do some things in the backfield, shed blocks. He kind of feels more of the two-gapping style of player, the Nick Saban style. Not really as much of a penetrative guy as maybe like Kane Womack would typically recruit or want. But I think he serves a very valuable purpose as far as, stopping the run, being, the leadership factor that we talk about. He's big on that front. And just he can be very disruptive and command quite a bit of attention on the interior. To me, the biggest X factor, Steve Mbumua, I think is how you say it.
JUCO guy.
Yes, and I thought it was interesting that they listed both of the JUCO defensive linemen, like Devontae Henry. Is he going to play Bandit? Is he going to play Wolf? Either way, as far as like the 2025 signing roster on the official website, they have them both listed as freshmen. I don't know if they just threw that up there. I don't think so, though. We get this rule.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Because typically, I know that Mbamua was only on the JUCO level for a year.
Yeah.
Typically, with what happened with Diego Pavia and just all the changes on the JUCO level, it's like, are you now getting guys playing a year or two of JUCO and still showing up as freshmen? It was a question that we had, and it seems like based off of the roster, and like I said, they could have just thrown, whoever was putting together the roster, they didn't know to change. I don't know. But they were listed as freshmen, and that stood out to me. So is this guy showing up a year more developed, 6'4", 290 now, being listed as a true freshman? Like if that's the case, he's kind of a big X factor in this too. I could see him pushing for playing time, powerful, can kind of, versatile in how you can use him. I think he's got some completeness to his game. But the biggest X factor, in my opinion, is James Smith. And just what we saw him do against Michigan, it was the flashes that you were, you started it. We always said the flashes were there. Like I was even watching him last offseason, the open practice, fan day, I guess you call it. Seeing him there, when he would get one-on-one matchups on the interior, he was wrecking people. And I remember I brought that up, but just you saw that this season, but it was very inconsistent. And we knew that kind of going in. It remained inconsistent, but you started to see him kind of lock it in down the stretch. And against Michigan, it kind of all came together. If he can continue that trajectory, the game-wrecking ability that he has, I don't think Alabama has had a defensive lineman who had this type of game-wrecking ability in quite some time. And so, if he can become that guy, I think from a depth standpoint, there's question marks. Jeremiah Beeman is a guy who I thought would play Bandit. He was bigger than I thought he would be. He continues to get bigger. He was listed as the backup nose with Damon Payne moving on to Michigan. In the bowl game, Beeman was the number 2 nose, and he showed some really good flashes himself. Edric Hill has some disruptive abilities. I think he's shown some flashes. But with James Smith, if he can become that guy, on top of having all the steadiness and experience and stuff around him, with like Tim Keenan being able to complement that, instead of just having good defensive linemen, if you can have at least one just absolute game wrecker, first round talent, disruptive piece on the interior to complement what you're doing on the exterior, I'm telling you that can end up making just such a massive difference for Alabama's defense, and he's more than capable. I just would like to see him continue to play with the consistency that he did against Michigan, because if he can do that, the sky's the limit for him, and the sky's the limit for this Alabama defense.
All right, give us that star rating, Clint.
I'm gonna go 4 stars, and it's because that bandit position, I feel so good about it. Like Kelby Collins being able to kick inside some. He's not gonna, Florida moved him inside fully. He had been an edge early, moved inside. I don't think he liked it. His impact diminished greatly in his second year when they did that. He's going to be playing that bandit, which I think was built for him much in the same way that it was built for LT Overton. But he can, like Overton was playing a lot outside for Texas A&M and in really, some wide 9 stuff. And so he had that side of it. Kelby Collins and how he was used, he's got some experience inside, and I could see them totally, using him situationally inside, let him get some one-on-one matchups. If you could maybe have James Smith, Kelby Collins, LT Overton, and a wolf out there like Rousseau or Yanze Pierre, if it's a situational down or whatever. I mean, your pass rush could probably be. I think it was more effective than people think, because a lot of fans just want sacks, and it's like, just be disruptive, hurries, hits, all those things. They were actually pretty good in that area, and it helped generate a lot of turnovers. But I think as far as being able to finish a little bit more and complement everything else that Kane Wommack does defensively with some more sacks, I think that Kelby Collins will end up being a massive part of that. But the bandit depth and the fact that, you got 2 guys who I really like at the top of your interior depth chart, on top of a lot of intriguing options behind them. Is it kind of like the offensive line where some established depth options need to be found or identified? Yes, but there's a lot of options that I really like there. So I'm going to go ahead and say 4 stars, because there's less questions to me, even though this thing jump. If James Smith if he plays up to being a 5-star, then this entire unit jumps to being a 5-star, because I know what they're getting in Overton. I need to see him finish more, but he's got those disruptive traits. He's got first-round talent, and if you get that on the interior from James Smith too, this defensive line can be as good as it's been in quite a while.
What do you anticipate the focal point being for this defensive line as they head into spring, summer, and fall camp after what you saw this past season of some weaknesses that you think they'll tune up?
Stop the run. And that's not just for the defensive line. I think, kind of doing some of their 3-man front stuff where they pull the wolf off the ball, gap responsibility, guys understanding their assignments consistently in those types of situations. And just the way that Kane Wommack likes to operate, going from, they did a lot more 2-gapping than I was expecting this past season. I think that was more so of personnel. But they're still going to 2-gap some. They're not going to be exclusively 1-gap, but I just think gap responsibility, being more sound on that, run fits, stopping the run, force opposing offenses into unfavorable down and distances more consistently, and then letting what's hopefully going to be an improved pass rush, on top of the fact that, when the defense knows you're throwing the football, they can do some things as far as baiting and all that to generate the turnovers. They did a phenomenal job of creating turnovers this past season, but I think you'll continue to see more of that. But your defensive line has to be able to win on the early downs to earn the ability to more consistently get after the quarterback on passing downs. And so
now,
that's what I'm hoping to see.
Keep going.
No, yeah, go
ahead.
Keep
going. I was going to ask, do you feel like that some of those issues will be resolved with just being more familiar with Kane Wommack's scheme and style?
Yeah, Overton finishing helps. Like, he was so disruptive, and he had so many opportunities to make. He was impacting the game. He was getting quarterbacks uncomfortable but he couldn't bring them down consistently enough. And it's like, if you start bringing some of these guys down and now it's, maybe it's a 2nd and 7 and you bring them down for a sack and now it's 3rd and 13 compared to they were able to escape, throw the football away. Now it's 3rd and 7. That's way more manageable than 3rd and 13.
Yeah.
Those types of things like that will help just simply him finishing. James Smith, he's got by far the high ceiling. Well, yeah, for the most part, as far as the interior pass rushers, but from a run stopping standpoint, he can still be a rock there and be really effective. And so more completeness from him and more consistency. But Jeremiah Beeman, I kind of compared him in some ways. He reminded me of Fletcher Cox, who played from Mississippi State, ended up playing well over a decade for the Philadelphia Eagles, came in as kind of a lighter 4-star defensive end edge type player. I think he was like 240 pounds, kind of immediately ballooned up to 280, 285. I think he ended up playing at Mississippi State like 6'4", 290. Was just a very disruptive presence on the interior. Beeman's got some of those qualities, and he's kind of beefed up in a similar way. So I'm hoping that he continues to develop. But, I think that just them being more consistent in what they're being asked to do from a run fit standpoint, and then just the continued development of some of these guys and guys like Overton learning how to finish a little bit better, I think it's going to make all the difference in the world.
Guys, this was a fun one. I really enjoyed this, and I'm looking forward to more continued position group battles and Clint's star rating, whether it's a 0.75, a whole star, or whatever we may get out of this. But before we go, make sure you give us your national championship predictions, team you're pulling for, everything like that. Give us your thoughts on, Clint's star ratings, what you feel like there. Clint, one more time, where can they find us?
Covercrimson.com, message board community. It's not just message boards. Like I do a lot of what you would consider to be like written articles. We just don't have like a front page that we put them on. And a lot of people complain about on the message board, they'll just share links. Then you got to click the link and then it'll take you to a different page. It's like, hey, can you just share it to the message board? Well, that's all we got. So all the long form stuff, but I also try to keep it more dissectable. I've been getting into more bullet points to where it's just easy for you to kind of follow and run through it real quick. But yeah, that's where you can find all of my written stuff. That's where the message board community is. They're all doing a phenomenal job. And then, the Cover Crimson YouTube channel is kind of what we've been continuing to grow. Tremendous growth since August. I think 9th or 10th is when I joined.
Yeah.
We have seen, just the number of subscribers, the participation and everything. It's all been great. We just want to continue to build it and make it the best Alabama YouTube channel and Alabama coverage out there.
Yes, and we truly love what we do for Disrupt Media. And the next round, make sure you check everyone out over on those platforms as well. Clint, I do have poker tonight, so I'll have to check back in with you guys on Wednesday. I got my first win of my poker career last Monday.
Yeah, you and we talked about that before we hopped on the last episode, and I had so many questions. First of all, it's very cool. Love the fact that you're into the poker thing. I'm sure some of our listeners are very much into it too. And it's one of those things where I just haven't done it forever, and you bringing it up, it started giving me that itch again. I haven't done it in quite a while.
Okay, well, I think Wednesday we'll start the show off with some poker discussion. If you guys are okay with that, I'll keep you updated on how I do tonight. And I am currently leading the standings in the season, so it's been good. I know it's been good so far.
So there's season standings. See, this is a lot more big boy than I've ever done. And I don't even know if I'm a very good poker player, but I have a blast playing it. So yeah, that'll be. I might have to get like a little bit of a preview before everybody else. I might have to text you and see how you end up doing, because I'm very curious. You winning last week was really. I mean, how many people play typically? Like it's a bunch, right?
Yeah, it's about 11 to 12.
Yeah,
no less than 9. I would say 8 or 9.
Yes, so it ain't your typical 4-man, playing some poker, 4 or 5-man. Like you're doing good things, EG.
Thank you. And we'll get into it all. If you have any questions, leave the poker questions as well. We'll be happy to answer them. But again, like we said, we love what we do for you guys. Make sure you're liking, subscribing, and we will see you Wednesday at 9:30.